By the time the film was over, I had the knowledge and experience necessary to work on a thesis film for someone getting their master's from USC. Let's talk about that story. Today's lesson: check child labor laws before hiring minors, and maybe reconsider having minors on set at all if possible. I learned that most films require long hours on set. In fact, 12-hour days are often considered standard, with a lunch break being given after 6 hours and wrap being called after 12 hours, hopefully. When we were working on instructions not included, we figured out how to make that work. A lot of us were usually up for school at 6 a.m. and not done with homework until after 6 p.m., so it wasn't like 12-plus hour days were foreign to us. We relied on snacks, we sat down when possible, but that much time with the film equipment, the grip gear, the other stuff meant that I became familiar with how to set up and tear down all the basic film equipment. Essentially, it meant I was just qualified to work on a legitimate film set in an entry-level position if the opportunity came up. One of my favorite films to work on when I was younger was Donde el cielo nació, or Where the Sky is Born. I gave up going to my first Giants game to work on this movie for free for 3 days. I got an interview with the producer for the film because I emailed a resume I'd made from the film school projects I'd worked on, luckily. However, when this producer found out I was only 17, I was told that child labor laws would not allow me to work the shifts they were requiring, which was 12 hours a day for 3 days in a row. I heard that and I offered to volunteer, saying that I was willing to work for experience, unpaid, and I could be there for all 3 of the days if they would allow me to. I was already familiar with the difference between a child worker and a child volunteer due to film school, and I knew that I had the stamina to do it. I was just worried if I had the technical know-how. You might ask why I was willing to do that instead of seeing my first ever professional sports game. Well, this was Freddie Gaitan's master's thesis film from USC. It focused on Mayan mythology, and somehow Freddie had gotten the Academy Award-winning cinematographer Haskell Wexler to be the additional cinematographer for the film. One of my dad's roommates from college had invited my dad and I to go to this Giants game in San Francisco. He had gotten tickets for it, but unfortunately it was the same weekend as the shoot, so I couldn't go because I had work. My dad really wished that we could have gone to the game, but it was too big of an opportunity to pass up, so he drove me to the shoot instead. Shout out to my parents supporting my career back then. I could not have done that without their help. Day 1, 12 p.m. Our first day was at the Hahn Family Wines Vineyard, south of Salinas in the fields between Gonzales and Soledad, I believe called the Santa Lucia Highlands, or the Santa Lucia Highlands, depending on your accent. I got to be a dolly grip for a good amount of the time, learning from the other crew about how to lay and even out track with what's called an apple box family and wooden wedges. I got to load and unload a real grip truck, and one of the producers even introduced me to the director, Freddie Gaitan himself. If you're unfamiliar with film sets, a grip getting to shake the hand of and introduce himself to the director on a set with over 40-50 people, that's not common. So I had a good experience there. While on set that first day, Haskell Wexler gave one particular nugget of wisdom that I've always kept with me. And for the filmmakers out there, I'd like to share it with you now. When he didn't like a particular shot, he said, "Let the motion of the camera reflect the emotions of the subject, because it will help the audience feel more connected to the emotions themselves." He spoke about it almost as if the cameraman was another actor in the scene. And, despite how heavy it was, if I hadn't been pushing the dolly, I never would have heard him say that. Being in close proximity allowed me to learn as much as I could overhear. We had lunch at 6 p.m., 6 hours after beginning work. The more sets I worked on, the more I found that to be a given. If a film didn't break for lunch exactly 6 hours after beginning, I would almost start to be worried about the legitimacy of the production. That night, we even had a great horned owl on set with us for a few shots. It was the first time I'd ever seen a trained animal that wasn't a common household pet, so that was very impressive to me. We were released just after midnight. I woke up and was back for day 2 by noon the next day. It was at a home in San Lucas, California, and I didn't say much about myself when asked, but I found that if I said I was graduating from HARA, or a film school, that spring, they automatically assumed I was around 19 and had started a 2-year trade school program right out of high school. In my opinion, it didn't matter how old I was if I'd learned the knowledge and could do the work. And I decided this would be how I talked about myself on film sets in the future. I would never mention my age. I'd mention film school without telling people it had been at the same time as high school, and they would naturally come to incorrect conclusions about my age. But if I ever had to say my real birthday, I had never lied, so it wouldn't be seen as deceit. Just an incorrect assumption. Keep in mind this is what I looked like at that age, so it wasn't like anyone would be able to tell just by looking at me. We broke for lunch at 6 p.m. again, 6 hours after we started working, and that night I learned how to green screen a sky. In one shot, 2 characters are supposed to be looking up at a particular constellation in the night sky, and so they looked at a green screen that would be replaced by that sky. The VFX supervisor was on set to make sure that we were placing the green screen sky correctly, and it was the first time I'd ever seen that happen. It was cool to have the assurance that this would work in post and not just hope that the VFX artist would be able to do something with it. By 1 p.m. the next day, I was back for day 3 at the Vineyard. I got to see a drone fly for the first time, and it felt like a big deal. I remember everyone was worried about it crashing or the shot not coming out when it came back. Drones were not at the level of technology and price that they are today, so a mistake with that vehicle would have been costly. We took a cast and crew group photo, also kind of a rarity on film sets because I think we were doing well on time until night set in and had to kill a little time until sunset. We had lunch at 7 p.m., as always 6 hours after we started work, and we had another night shoot by the old tree that we shot by the first night as well. And then around 10 p.m., Where the Sky is Born wrapped for the night. At that point, the rest of the crew geared up for their return to LA, and I had a strong desire to go with them and keep working on the soundstage parts of the film, but I couldn't. And from then on, I would see living in LA County as my end goal. I had seen Hollywood as where celebrities made huge films, but I lost 6 days of work on that film because I didn't live close enough to LA. And that grounded me to the reality that living in close enough proximity to the largest film hub in the world meant there were thousands of opportunities that could be real possibilities for people at my skill level. In hindsight, this would be the first of a number of unpaid projects I would take on, for better or worse. This also taught me a weird lesson to take into my adult life. If I pretend to be older than I am, I'll get more work experience. I had put in about 36 hours of work without making a dime. My family probably lost at least $50 to $100 due to gas money. But I'd worked on a USC master's level thesis film with a man judged by the International Cinematographers Guild to be one of the top 10 most influential cinematographers of all time. It would be a rare example of when working for free would feel incredibly worth it. And I would perhaps work for free a little too often in the future in the hopes of something like that happening again. It would actually, a couple times, allowing me to work with John G. Avildsen, Kareem A. Cox, and other award winners and award nominees, but that's another story. Now, I didn't get in trouble for working on this film because I was a minor willing to spend all my free time learning the craft of filmmaking. However, it's my understanding that this would have been a crime if I had been paid to work the 12 hours per day. I wasn't, and I'll always be thankful to that set for allowing me to get the extra legitimate work experience alongside an Oscar winner before I moved to LA. But life is about what we're willing to sacrifice in order to get what we want more. I never had the experience of going to a baseball game with my father, or any pro sports game with any family member for that matter. That was something I had to give up in order to do this. I wouldn't end up seeing a professional sports game of any kind until 11 years later. I think there's a saying that's something like, sometimes we have to make our present a little worse so that we can make our future a lot better. And I was definitely thinking along those lines when I made that decision. Put in the hard work now and reap the benefits later. I also want to say that even though this was a great experience for me, I wouldn't necessarily recommend other people follow my example, because not every film set is as safe as that one luckily was, especially for minors. And I don't want anyone getting hurt or taken advantage of based on advice I've given. Keep in mind, I'm not an entertainment lawyer. I'm just a filmmaker explaining my experiences, how I got into the rooms I did to meet the people I did, and what you might learn from what I've seen. Fun fact 1. This was my first time setting up and driving a J. Fisher dolly, and it sure was heavy, especially when cinematographers Jeremy Royce or Haskell Wexler were sitting on it for the shot. But that was how I learned to lay flat, even track to get a smooth shot, and I would go on to use that skill on a number of different films for Kellen Gibbs, but that's another story. Unfortunately, I've never been able to see that film, so I have no idea how it turned out. If anyone knows how I might watch it, please message me. Anyway, that's my lesson, story, and fun facts for the day. I tried to include info for friends, filmmakers, history buffs, employers, mythology enthusiasts, and more. So hopefully you learned something along the way.